Hey guys, I'm Captain Mitchell Duggar from Key West, Florida. I'm down here in Southern California to put together a series of fly casting videos to help some clients of mine. I'm going to be covering everything from the basics to troubleshooting for the more advanced caster. Hope you enjoy. A lot of people talk about a bend or a load in the rod, and we're trying to figure out what that means. And I think the better that we understand what we're trying to do, it just makes it easier for us to accomplish that in the end. So the first thing I'm going to talk about and show you is the spline of the rod. And basically what that is the backbone, okay? That's where the rod has its most power, and it's where the rod always wants to back up to. So when we take a rod off a plane, there's going to be a natural rolling motion for that blank to try to get back on the spline. Now on the fly rods, that's going to run exactly opposite of the guide, so that's going to be on the back of the rod. So I was shown a couple years ago in a fly shop a neat way to really kind of feel this. And so what I'm gonna show you technique, and I'm gonna show you why we're gonna do this. It's a little weird on this lumpy ground, but I think we'll still be able to get the concept. Okay. What you're gonna do is you're gonna set the butt section of the rod on the ground, and it doesn't really matter where you grab the rod. You're gonna take your hand and allow that rod to just kind of lay right in the cross between your thumb and your index finger there. And then with your other hand, all you're gonna do is you're gonna put good pressure, and we wanna put a bend or a load in this rod. And what you're gonna find is as you roll it over, it's gonna naturally wanna pop down onto what's called the spline of that rod. And you can roll it any way you want to, but whenever you put pressure and roll it forward, it's always gonna roll down. And you'll see that where you're putting the pressure, that rod always wants to roll opposite of those guides there. So come and stand on my right side here. Let's try to get you on some good solid ground. All you want to do is open up that hand right there. Perfect. Now you're not going to be able to hurt or break this rod. I want you to put really good downward pressure there, and just maybe a little bit lighter than that, and try to let that rod kind of roll through these both hands. So don't move that one and just roll that one. See how it rolls around, and then it always, it flips, it kicks down in there. So try it one more time. Boom, it's going to come around right there. Once we establish where that spline is, now you know that's where the load and the power of the rod is coming to. When we take this rod off a plane, what we're doing is we're loading that 45, or a bunch of different angles, but basically 45 to that spline. That rod naturally wants to take that load and bring it back into the spline of the rod, okay? So when we come off a plane, what we're doing is we're taking that rod off of that load, off of that spline, but the rod always wants to put it back on there. And so that's where a lot of our tailing loops and some of our common problems kind of come into place, all right?
Okay.
Great. The next thing I want to talk about, we obviously know that we want to load that rod off the spline, okay? So what we're going to be working on now is how we're actually going to grip the rod. And there's a bunch of different ways to do it. A bunch of different people are going to teach you a bunch of different ways. But what I found is always the best is to make sure and have your thumb up on top of the rod. The reason for that is the wrist is naturally a really weak part of your body. It doesn't matter if you lift weights all the time or not. It's really, really weak. And what people have a tendency to do is try to load that rod with the meat of their hand. And it's really weak, and you ended up taking that rod off a plane and doing things, you don't build up good muscle memory because there's no muscles there. Okay. So what we're going to do is try to keep the thumb right up on top of the rod, and that's going to be important for pushing through. So in this first exercise, all we're going to do is that reel's going to hang down real naturally, and this rod should balance real nice and easy. And you're going to find like a pretty natural balance point in that rod that's going to be further up the handle. You don't want to come back here and choke down so far. One nice thing about these saltwater rods and then the reels are typically heavier than their freshwater counterparts. One reason that's nice is with this heavier grain weight and this tip going out through there, we have a better balance point higher up on the rod, and what this does creates more of a fulcrum, so it makes more of a natural kind of swing as that rod goes back and forth, and we want to use that as much to our advantage as possible. So what you want to do when we're establishing this fly cast is we're not going to worry about the left hand to start, but what I want you to do is grip that fly rod with your thumb right up on top. Okay. And then what we're going to do is we're going to take our middle finger and we're going to grip that fly line, and basically through these three fingers like that. So when you're gripping this fly line, think about using these two fingers like a pair of scissors, and go ahead and pinch that there to start, and then it's going to be real natural. We're going to keep that thumb right up on top of the rod, okay? Go ahead and try that for me. Thumb up on top of the rod, great. Yep, bring that line, pretend it's cutting like scissors. Now perfect, now this is going to be really good for fishing and stuff later, and it's important to establish where you want to put that line. Some people will loop it through their index finger, sometimes they'll do it through their middle finger. I prefer the middle finger because I have more control, and that's a great place to start, okay?
Okay.
The first thing that we're going to worry about is our back cast. Most people feel like the forward cast is the most important. Well, you can't get a good forward cast without a good back cast. So the first thing we're going to do is kind of establish feeling the load and the bend of the rod is to do what I call a pick up and a lay down. It's real simple. All we're going to do with the rod is we're going to have real natural, real relaxed. What's really important about all this is because we don't want to get too tight, too tense. You're going to start feeling a lot of pressure in there in your shoulder. That's just going to lead to fatigue. So everything just nice and loose in the shoulders, okay? This rod is just going to lay naturally right down here to the side. It's also really natural to go ahead and hinge the elbow. Remember, with keeping that line pinched and your thumb right up on top of the rod, the only thing we want to do is we're going to lift this rod, and what we want to see is we want to see this forearm come to almost level, straight up and down like that, okay? And then with a slight extension of the wrist, we're just going to open up that wrist. Now, let me show you, when you open up that wrist, that's all we're looking for, is just a slight opening. The wrist isn't extended forward like that, and it's not dropped way out like that. It's a very simple opening of the wrist, and it's no more than that. The other thing that we're going to focus on this is when you're coming to that back cast, we want to see the face of the reel, and we want to see our fingernails. The reason that's important is if we're seeing the face of the reel and we're seeing our fingernails, we've known that we've kept this rod in plane in one way, and there's many ways to take it off and you know, fewer ways to keep it on plane. If you look down here and you see your thumbnail, this reel is now turned away from us, okay? And so now if you look, we've now loaded that rod about 90 degrees or 45 degrees off of that plane there, okay? So that's not where we want it to go. So we want to be looking down and seeing fingernails and the face of the reel, okay? So all we're gonna do on this pickup and lay down is we're gonna focus on the forearm. We're gonna extend the forearm to a vertical position, pause, and then drop it straight back down like we're chopping wood, okay? That's all we're gonna do. Your timing and your canter and your cast is gonna change depending on how much length of line you have out. Typically for this small length of line, what I recommend is kind of a 1-2 count. So in your head, kind of like a metronome as you're thinking, you wanna come back 1-2, put it down. Back 1-2, put it down. And the only thing we're worrying about on this deal is bringing that forearm to a vertical position, opening up that wrist, and setting it down. And I don't care if you got to practice a couple times with letting that fly line even drop completely behind you. That's fine. All we're trying to do here is a vertical forearm and an open wrist, and then we're going to chop wood coming straight back down, okay?
Okay.
So let's hold on to that grip like we were talking about there. Fantastic. I'm just going to stand in here on your left side. So this first little section, I just want you to get nice and loose. Everything's nice and limber. We don't get too tight. And I'm going to work with you on this first couple, then I'm going to let you work on it yourself. So with this thumb on here, all we want to do is we want this forearm to come to an open position and the wrist to open up like that. Now don't move and hold that right there for me, okay? It's probably really easy for you to see on the camera. Now we have this forearm that's vertical and we have a wrist that is open. You can't see the other side of the reel, which is good for us because now we can see the face of the reel and we can see our fingernails as we're going. Also, if you look back and follow your kind of chin around, we have a great vertical angle of the rod. And you heard me talk to Lance earlier about poking a hole in the sky. And this is textbook poking a hole in the sky. We have that rod at an angle, so that way it maintains a bend or a low in the rod. Hold that tight right there. So now we have a bend or a low in the rod there. When people run into a problem, they oftentimes hold on to it there. Their forearm might get vertical, but then they drop it way back in here like this, okay? When that rod tip drops down and flat, we no longer have that bend or that natural load in the rod, okay? So let me hold on to this for you real quick. You can go ahead and drop it. Let me just get this going right back forward for you, okay? So for the first couple times, all I want you to do is just stay nice and limber, and all we're gonna do is get the forearm to a vertical position and open up that wrist. Good. Now pause for a second. Watch right here. You see how far out this is extended? I want this elbow to drop down naturally. You're putting too much into it right now, okay? Elbow's gonna drop down naturally, so that way we're not extended out. Arm's gonna come slightly out like that. Perfect. Now stop right there and see what you did. We want that thing to look more about just like that. Okay? Good. Back 1-2, forward. Put, set it down. Back 1-2, great. Now, when you come down, I want you, just drop this. It's all right. Just drop that elbow right down to there. Keep it right there. Good. Elbow down. Perfect. Good. Now turn your chin and watch. I want you to see where that rod tip stops. That's perfect. Forward, down. Great. Watch the rod tip. Beautiful. Just like that. Perfect. Back 1-2, forward 1-2. Great. Back 1-2, forward 1-2. Fantastic. Back 1-2, forward 1-2. That's great. Back 1-2, forward 1-2. Awesome. Make sure that this elbow is coming down because the whole point of this cast, there is no deceleration in a fly cast. And what I mean by that, there's a constant acceleration to a complete stop. So what we're looking to do is we're looking to have this forearm do all the heavy lifting right here. Remember, the wrist is really weak. This forearm is gonna, see how you're starting with the wrist? Okay. The forearm is gonna come to a vertical position. Then the wrist is only going to slightly open like that. One way to think about it, and it's kind of hard to conceptualize it because it's in the back, but if you've ever thrown darts, it's very similar to that. You don't throw darts and just kind of slow down, come to a stop. You extend through, and then you flick that wrist, and that's where a lot of your speed is coming from. Your forearm's bringing in the power, your wrist is accelerating that line, okay? Okay, set it down for a second for me. Cool. So this next little deal that we're going to work on, it's going to be the exact same thing, but what I want you to do is drop this rod out to your side a little bit. What you're doing is a very traditional trout cast and dry flies. A lot of those casts stay right up over your head like that. When we have any kind of on-hand wind, we got some weird stuff going on, we want to try to keep that fly line away from us as much as possible. And what we're going to work on that is more of a sidearm style, okay? So instead of, if you notice when you're coming back, and go ahead and hold on to it, you're having a tendency to almost bring in your wrist to your shoulder, okay? So what we want to do is we want to bring this thing a little more sideways here. Okay. And you see, as we're going back 1, 2, forward 1, 2.
Oh, okay.
Back 1, 2, forward 1, 2. Back 1, 2, and we're going to stop right here. Don't move. You can see that we have this rod tip and this rod away from our body. That's going to save us a lot in the future, especially if we have a slight on-hand wind. We want to do and establish more of a sidearm cast. The other thing that that does is by dropping the rod tip slightly closer to the water with that sidearm, there's less time for that fly line to drop. If you're casting very vertically right up above you, once you stop with that fly line and it's so high up in the air, the wind really has a tendency to blow it one side or the other. The lower we can kind of get that rod tip to the water, the better. So go ahead and end it in your forward cast there. And on this next kind of, make sure that you're coming out sideways. Perfect. Set it down. Back 1, 2, forward 1, 2. Great. Good. Remember, the forearm is doing the power lifting, the wrist is doing the speed. Get the power moving with the forearm. There you go. Beautiful. For right now, and for all intents and purposes, we don't necessarily want this arm to a full extension, because what we're doing is bringing a little bit of a bad habit. When you stop right here, if you notice, this is lined up in line with the shoulder. There's no way for us to get it to the back cast without going through us. So let me see this rod real quick. All I want you to do here, again, nice and gentle, really relaxed, is you're chopping wood, okay?
Gotcha.
So we're gonna go back 1, 2, just like a hatchet.
Okay.
Back 1, 2, straight down. Not an extension out, just a straight down.
I don't know why.
Back 1, 2,
you
forward
just
1, 2.
kinda,
Well, because
it's a habit.
Well, as a cast and anything else, you want to extend it out. And I think a lot of times what I'm trying to do and try to teach a lot of people is to take the human element out of the casting as much as possible. Allow these rods and reels to do what they're, and these lines to do what they're designed to do. So right now, I'm trying to establish your confidence in this cast. Go ahead. Remember, the forearm does the heavy lifting. Perfect. Elbow down at your side, don't extend forward. That's good. Good, watch that rod angle. Remember, we're gonna come back and poke a hole in the sky. Yep, good. And that way you can watch it and see. That's it right there, perfect. You can see as Jennifer's casting, the better cast that she has is when that forearm goes to a vertical place, judged by that pink marker there. Her wrist is slightly open, you can tell that rod's fully loaded. On some casts where she's a little bit off, and there's more extension of that forearm, you can see the rod tip drops flat, and the line doesn't have near as much speed going forward. All right, so we just worked on the pickup and the put down. And basically what we're trying to establish there is that forearm motion and then that wrist as well, okay? On this next thing, what we're gonna do is we're gonna start utilizing the left hand. And this is important for a couple different reasons. One, obviously, once we kind of get to fishing and double hauling and all that stuff, we're gonna be using the left hand. But what's important about the left hand now is we're gonna be putting slight amount more of friction on the guides by utilizing our left hand. When we're just holding on to the line in our right hand, that line is in line with the guides, okay? So by utilizing our left hand, we're putting a little bit more friction in the guides, and we're gonna start feeling more of a bend or a load in the rod, and that's gonna come into play in your right hand. And eventually what we're really gonna be looking for and what you really wanna try to feel is the left hand. Everybody talks about feeling the rod loading in the right hand, how they can't feel it, how they can feel it. A lot of times what people do to try to get that feeling is by overloading the rod. So they'll take a 9-weight rod and put a 10 or 11 weight line on it. That's just teaching bad habits, and so we're not gonna do that. Once you get better in this, and eventually what you're gonna realize is your left hand has more to do, or a lot more to do with the fly rod than you ever thought, and it's almost as equal with the right hand, okay? So what I want you to do to start, and whenever you always start in this cast, is we're going to take about a strip of line off of the reel. The reason this is important is we don't want this hand tight to the reel. The reasoning is once we start, now that we're doing this pickup and this put down, if this hand is tight to the reel, you have a tendency to turn your body with it, because as you're coming back, that right hand is pulling your left hand, and we don't want that. That's another bad habit with the shoulders, and we're going to try to eliminate all bad habits. That's why we're starting the way that we're starting, okay? So all we're going to do with this left hand is hold on to the line. We're just going to pinch it between the index finger and our thumb, just like that. And basically what I want you to do is hold this down at your left hip. Okay, it doesn't need to be stuck down here. You don't have to put your hand in the pocket, but the general principle is nice and loose, just like everything else. We're not going to get tense, and we're going to set this down. Okay, and all we're going to do is the same deal. We're going to go back 1, 2, forward 1, 2, and set it down. Remember, back 1, 2, chop wood, come straight down. Okay, that's all we're going to be looking for. And once we kind of work on that a little bit, I want you to start feeling what that line is doing in that left hand, and that's going to become apparent for the next thing we do. You ready?
Okay. Yeah.
Remember on your grip that we're not trying to death grip this thing. We don't want to, it doesn't take that much force. You're going to be tense somewhere. I want you to loosen the shoulders. Don't go throwing my rod all over the place, but you want to hold on to it nice and light. Don't get in a habit of wrapping that up either. All it's going to be is a light pinch, and all you're going to be feeling, and go ahead and pinch it pretty hard, okay? You're going to be feeling just a little bit of that as you're going back and forth, and that's what I want you to focus on. But more than that, remember, everything that we're working on is baby steps. Rod's going to be slightly out to the side. Forearm's going to come to vertical position first before the wrist opens up. Then all we're going to do is come straight forward, keep the elbow here, and we're going to chop wood straight down. That's it, okay? Let me get it behind you and go ahead and go. Great. Back 1, 2. Forward 1, 2, good. Elbow down more at your side for me. Perfect. Slight more side arm in the cast. Back 1, 2, forward 1, 2, good. Back 1, 2, forward 1, 2. All right, stop for a second for me. Really make sure and focus that your forearm is doing the heavy lifting. Remember, the forearm's going to generate everything going, the wrist is going to increase the speed. So don't open up your wrist right here and then move the forearm back. Keep that butt of that rod a little bit tighter into that arm until this comes up, then it opens to there. The opening is this, and hopefully you guys can see that. That's all the opening is. That thing is going to move an inch or two away from your forearm. So as that thing comes back, the butt of the rod is close to the forearm, forearm comes up, wrist opens up, and that is all the opening up it's going to do, okay? Let me get out of your way and go ahead. Good. Straight down, elbow down, chop wood. That's it. Back 1, 2, forward 1, 2. Great. Back 1, 2, forward 1, 2. Keep that left hand a little bit lower down to your side for me. Left hand. Perfect. Back 1, 2, forward 1, 2. Good. Remember, chopping wood. Back 1, 2, straight down. That's it. Back 1, 2, forward 1, 2. Fantastic. Beautiful. Don't extend out. Keep that elbow down to your side and chop wood as you're coming forward. Straight down, swinging the hatchet. Back 1, 2, forward 1, 2. Great. Jennifer, you're doing great so far. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to work on carrying line. And all that means is we're going to try to keep the line in the air without allowing it to hit the water or the grass in the forward or the back cast. But keep in mind that everything that we're working on is going to be building blocks and baby steps up to the next thing. So we can't forget what we learned before. So as a quick overview, we've done the pick up and put down. We know that we want to see that forearm come to a vertical position, and with a slight opening of the wrist, we're going to add a little bit more speed onto that cast, okay? We also realize that when we hold on to that line with that left hand, we're putting a little bit more friction on the guides of that rod, creating more of a bend or a load in that rod, okay? So the next thing that we got to work on is carrying that line. So what I want you to do is same way that we were working on before with the pickup and the put down. But instead what I want you to do is I want you to focus on a spot that is above the horizon that's out in front of you and not drop the rod tip below that, okay? And we're gonna do what's called false casting. False casting does a couple things for you. In a trout fishing scenario, a false cast will allow you to dry out that dry fly for a softer presentation, allow that thing to float. That's what the false casting is for. In saltwater, what the false casting is doing is it allowing us to work on our distance as well as our accuracy. We want to try to limit how many false casts we do in an actual practical fishing scenario, but when we're out here in the field practicing, it's good to be able to do 5 or 6 of them at a time before you go ahead and set the line down. So what I want you to do, just like before, left foot slightly forward, light grip on the rod, line in the left hand. What we're going to do is we're going to come back and we're going to go back 1, 2, And then in the forward cast, all we're gonna do is extend that arm straight out and stop that rod anywhere up above the horizon. And what we're really looking for is the reciprocating angle from back on our back cast and pick up and put down and this thing forward here. So all that's gonna look like is you're gonna be falling through with that thumb and just stopping that short. Remember, in the fly cast, it's always constant acceleration to complete stop. So what we don't want to do is we don't want to drop this thing slowly down or flat. We want to maintain and bend that rod. So on this next deal, what I want you to do, just like we did before, line in the left hand, we're going to come back, forward, back, forward, back, down. Okay, so 2 false casts and we're putting it down. Don't worry, if you do 1, you put it down, great. If you do 3, put it down, great. It doesn't really matter. But all we're gonna try to do is keep that fly line elevated. You're gonna mess up the first couple ones and I'm gonna show you how to better correct that, okay? So again, everything's a building block. What I want you to do right now is I want you to focus on keeping that forearm vertical, opening up that wrist, and all I want you to do is 3 or 4 pick up and put down just like we've been doing before, okay? Go ahead. Back 1, 2, forward. Back 1, 2, forward. Elbow down at your side. Perfect. Back 1, 2, forward. Back 1, 2, forward. Back 1, 2, forward. Set it down. Fantastic. That's great. Now I want you to bring in, strip in a couple strips on that line. Remember how we do that? Perfect. Couple strips. Good. Stop right there. Now what I want you to do is remember that canter, that back 1, 2, forward 1, 2. And I want you to keep that rod tip up above the horizon in your forward cast. We're gonna do 3 false cast, and then we're gonna set it down. Go ahead. Back 1, 2, forward 1, 2. Back 1, 2, forward 1, 2. Back 1, 2, forward 1, 2. Good, set it down. Good.
Sorry about that one.
Where are you going? All right, that's fantastic. I think you did a really good job there. So what we want to try to do is maintain a little more consistency in what we're doing, and that's just going to come over time. So you got a little bit carried away every time we throw a new step in there. That's just going to happen, okay? So on this next little section, just like you did there, but I want you just to slow everything down and remember that cadence in your head and watch. This is how it's going to look. It's going to go back 1, 2, forward 1, 2. Back 1, 2, forward 1, 2. Back 1, 2, forward 1, 2. Your back has good strength to it right now. We're going to establish a little more strength on your forward cast, but I don't want you to do a full extension of that forearm yet, okay? Back 1, 2, forward 1, 2, and just stop it. And look how you see how I'm not extending that elbow out? I mean, watch where my forearm at. It's right in here. Forward 1, 2. Back 1, 2, forward 1, 2. I generate high line speed and good turnover because I come to a complete stop. Not because I'm coming in here and I'm strong and I'm whipping it out there. That's not doing anything for me. All I'm doing is stopping it at the right time. So, back 1, 2, forward 1, 2. Back 1, 2, forward 1, 2. Set it down. And that's all we got to do. You ready?
Yeah.
Go ahead. Back 1, 2, forward 1, 2. Good. Feel that rod and that thumb, pushing forward with the thumb. Back 1, 2, forward 1, 2. Back 1, 2, forward 1, 2. Back 1, 2, forward 1, 2. Good, set it down. Now I want you to take 2 strips of line back in out of the rod tip. So go ahead and put that line in your hand there. Strip in a little bit more for me. Good, we're gonna get you a little more focus and control in this next section. You had a little bit too much string out there for you. All right, go ahead and go from right there. Elbow down close to your side, okay? Don't elevate that. And let's work on that side arm a little bit. Drop that rod tip towards David and I, just a little bit more. That's great. Back 1, 2, forward 1, 2. Not all the way sideways. Good. Turn your head to the right. Watch for that rod tip stopping. Fantastic. Poking a hole in the sky. Back 1, 2, forward 1, 2. Back 1, 2, forward 1, 2. Back 1, 2, forward 1, 2. Great. Go ahead and set it down. Fantastic. That's really nice. So as we're slowly starting to work on this, I'm going to start bringing your arm or your casting, your forward cast up a little bit. Before, when we started with the pickup and the put down, we lifted it up and we dropped back down, okay? This is not the natural motion we want to do, but basically what I was trying to do is establish kind of what that feeling is when that forearm gets vertical. So what you're going to do now, exactly like you've been doing before, but all I want you to do, we're going to bring this back real nice and slow. We're going to do it together. You always try to move your wrist when I'm helping you, okay? Don't move your wrist until this forearm comes vertical and then the wrist opens up here, okay? Now here what I want you to look at, and just hold on right there. This is another way that we're gonna start talking about playing, and we can kind of see it with the rod tip back here, but where we can really start to see it is right here on the reel. We know that we want this rod and reel to end at the same height above the ground once we've stopped in our forward cast, okay? So as you're coming forward on that forward cast, you're gonna slightly extend your arm into almost a punch-like motion as that thing comes out to here, not quite full, about right down to there with that thumb up on top, okay? And I want you to stop right there and I want you to look what's going on here. When you go forward, when you're following through with this thumb, this rod tip is gonna naturally go down and the butt of the rod is gonna come closer to your forearm, which is great because what we know is once we go ahead and start getting into our back cast, here comes the discipline. The elbow is gonna drop in, forearm's gonna go vertical, wrist is gonna open up to here, okay? And now we come forward into a punch, all right? But make sure that you're holding, you're gonna start feeling tension right here because you're holding this thing out a little bit chicken winged, okay? So you can, a lot of times when I say sidearm or something, or different angles, people try to do that vertically or out in here. Almost everything needs to happen right in here. And in this casting, this opens up and it goes out to here. So this is what we're looking for in a basic punch. Back 1, 2, forward 1, 2. Back 1, 2, forward 1, 2. Okay? Let me get out of your way. Go ahead and go. Beautiful. Back 1, 2, punch forward 1, 2. Back 1, 2, forward 1, 2. Back 1, 2, forward 1, 2. Back 1, 2. Great. Go ahead and set it down. Jennifer, great loops and great line speed. Do you feel the difference in there? That thing is going forward, it's rocketing out. Now, are you starting to feel it in your left hand? It's really important that you start to feel this thing in your left hand, especially for our next start, or our next a little lesson. So I want you to do that one more time, that whole thing for me. Back 1, 2, punch forward 1, 2. Good, open up that wrist and that back cast. Back 1, 2, forward 1, 2. Okay, set it down.
And then I had my hand in front of me, which is
okay.
bad.
That's fine. There's going to be a lot of things that you're going to do wrong. One thing that you started to do on that is as you're coming forward, we kind of got back into the whipping it straight down. Remember, once we stop on that back cast, we're going to come forward and with a little bit of an extension, okay? Let me see that real quick.
Yeah,
get you kind of untangled and start. And what we'll be able to do, and see if we can put like a marker on that, look back and see that, because what happened was she got really inconsistent with a lot of those motions. The set before that was nice and smooth, and what you'll see, especially when you start getting fatigued, is that you're kind of going through the motions, but the motions are a little bit off. Right. So let's try this one more time before we move on to the next step. Let me strip you in just a little bit there. Left hand on. Thumb right up on top of the rod. Your back cast looks great. What I want you to focus on this time is extending forward with that arm, exactly. And when you come, now watch that. See what you did there? See how the elbow's moving, but the forearm's not. So now you're scissoring that rod back and forth. What needs to happen is back 1, 2, forward 1, 2. Back 1, 2, forward 1, 2. Back 1, 2, set it down right there. Okay. Good. Now, don't hold this thing. You don't need, I want this left hand right here. You don't need to extend it out. We'll work on double hauling it another time. Go ahead. Back 1, 2, forward 1, 2. Back 1, 2, punching straight forward out in front of you. That's it. The next thing we're going to start talking about is shooting line. And shooting line is really important because it gets us from a shorter distance to a longer distance. In the false casting, your false casting kind of helps you with your left and right motion and your accuracy. Shooting line is going to get the fly there. There is only one time in the entire cast that you can ever shoot line, and that is once the rod has come to a complete stop on the forward or on the back cast, okay? So there's technically 2 times, but the main thing to take away is the only time you can shoot line is once that rod has come to a complete stop. The first time that we want to start working on this is shooting line only in the forward cast. We don't have to worry about the back cast till quite a bit later down the line. What that is going to look like is we're going to do just like we've been practicing. But what I want you to do on this one is make sure that you have enough lines stripped in to where the belly of the line just touches the grass, okay? That's all we're going to work on. And what I want you to do is work on a couple of those false casts. And so you're going to go back 1, 2, forward 1, 2. Back 1, 2, forward 1, 2. Once you have come to the complete stop in your forward cast, all I want you to do is make a circle with your index finger and your thumb. That's it, okay? And this is really important for a couple different reasons. What this allows us to do is allows the line to go through our fingers, but then it also gives us control of it. What some people have a tendency to do when they shoot line is they stop and they drop everything like that.
Okay.
Although for what we're doing right now, that would be fine. What that does is build bad habit in the future. If we're sitting out there fishing and you finally get a good shot in front of a fish and you let that line go, now we're up here looking for it somewhere. And in the heat of the moment, the worst thing you can do is come up here and try to figure out where everything is. If you make that circle when you shoot line, you always know where that fly line is, and it can always make it back to your stripping finger, okay? So hopefully those wind gusts are out of the way, but right now, all I want you to do, just like we've been working on, just a light pinch in the fingers right there, back 1, 2, forward 1, 2, back 1, 2, forward 1, 2. And on your third one, I want you to stop and allow that line to go. It's real important to keep the rod tip up high and just see how much line you can get out, okay?
Okay.
The other thing that you're working on here is stripping, so you want to go ahead and bring that line right back into this hand, always into your right hand, and strip down below it. That's perfect, just like that. Strip it on in until there's just a fly line hanging on right there. Perfect. Now hold on to the line with just the left hand. Thumb's going to stay right up on top. Everything that we've been doing before is the exact same. The only difference is when you come to the complete stop on that last cast, you're going to let that line go through your fingers, and that's all you're going to do. And let me go ahead and tell you what you're going to do. You're not going to do that. You're going to false cast a couple times. It's going to get in your head that you're going to go ahead and start shooting line. You're going to get excited, and you're going to let that line go as you're coming forward, and the line's not going to go anywhere, and it's going to come up and slap the rod. You ready? You ready to go ahead and do that?
Yes.
Okay, I bet you do it.
Okay.
But don't think about it too much. Think about what we've been practicing before. Vertical with the arm, opening up the wrist, back 1, 2, punching forward 1, 2. That's all I want you to worry about. The only thing we've added on now is stopping on that forward cast and allowing that line to shoot out.
All right.
Go ahead. Back 1, 2, forward 1, 2. Okay, didn't quite do what I thought you were going to do, but pretty close to it. Yeah, it's still sitting there.
It's still here.
That's right. So what we need to do now is just kind of establish a little bit higher line speed. And the way that we're going to get that is by working a little bit more on what your hands are doing here. I really want you to extend forward like it is going to be a punch in there. Exactly. And that's going to get that line speed to generate. And as that line speed generates, the rod loads and then unloads faster. So go ahead and try that one more time for it. Make sure and get into a good rhythm before you go ahead and shoot. Back 1, 2, forward 1, 2. Elbow down at your side. It's all right, a little bit of windage. Down at your side, a little more sidearm. Back 1, 2, forward 1, 2. All right, go ahead and pause for a second. Good, stop right there and try not to move too much. One thing that we've just developed is a little bit of a bad habit where you're kind of coming in across and just casting with your wrist here, okay? So what we're gonna do is we're gonna do this together for a second if you don't mind. So just go ahead and hold on to the rod. I'm gonna keep your arm on the elbow here. Back 1, 2, forward 1, 2. And see when I come forward and punch, it's it's a sharp stop. Stop,
Gotcha.
Okay? So I want you to go ahead and let go of the fly line once we come to a complete stop on the forward cast.
Oh.
Yeah, and let it go.
I see. Oh, okay.
Now you see how that shot, we're not putting much more force into it, but what we're doing is making those pauses more dramatic, okay? And that's all you have to do. It's not about how much force you're putting into it, it's about how you're applying that force, okay? So go ahead and practice stripping in line. Get the belly line to come all the way down until it hits the grass. A little bit more. Perfect. That's a great start right there. Let's do that one more time. Just get into that nice little rhythm for me, okay? Back 1, 2. Forward 1, 2. Back 1, 2. Forward 1, 2. All right, go ahead and set it down. Good. All right, guys, here we are on day 2 back with Jennifer. We're going to go over the exact same way that we started off yesterday with the basics. And it's really important when you're starting off doing this to keep that repetition going. Every time you show up to the park, every time you show up to practice, start with the basics, and that way you can work on to some of the finer points of the fly casting. So we're going to get started, and just like we did yesterday, we're going to keep in mind the grip of the rod. Remember, we want that thumb to be right up on top of the rod. We're going to pinch that line in our fingers, just like the scissors there, and hold on to it. And the first thing we're going to do is just the pick up and the put down, just like we did yesterday, nothing different. Keep in mind what we saw yesterday is you had a tendency to extend your elbow out and hold that rod way out here. Think about this, if you're going to hold a 5-gallon bucket of water it is much more difficult to hold it out there than it is here. Try to keep this thing in nice and close to you, and that way we can get more reps in and a little bit less fatigue at the end of the day. So starting off, we're gonna have our left foot slightly forward, shoulders pretty much squared up to the target. We're gonna have this left elbow down here pretty close to our side, okay? And remember, the whole exercise here is we're gonna be lifting this forearm to a vertical position, and we're gonna increase the line speed with our wrist. So what that looks like is we're gonna come back nice and smooth, forearm comes to a vertical position, and the wrist slightly opens. Remember, this is not a huge opening with the wrist, it's just a very slight opening, and we wanna have that elbow down here to our side, okay? So what we're gonna do to start off is we're gonna lift, right back down, okay? Lift up, back down. And there's a couple things we can take away from this. One, making sure that our elbow's close into our side. And remember, when we're doing this, it's always good to watch and look back and see what that rod tip's doing. So, and we're gonna watch that with our chin and not with our shoulders. So when you come back here, maybe it's better just to pause a couple times. Make sure that you're getting that vertical forearm and that open wrist. We can look back there and see we're poking a hole in the sky. We got a nice high rod tip, and it just comes right back here. These first steps are never about actually casting. We're trying to build up muscle memory, and that's where this repetition is going to come into play. So one more time, lift, open the wrist, right back down forward, okay? All right, let's go ahead and try that. Exactly, thumb right up on top of the rod, left foot slightly forward, you got that line pinched in there good. We're gonna keep this elbow right down here at our side, not all out. And remember yesterday, part of your tendency was to move that wrist before we started moving that forearm. So let me get you set up one more time right out here in front here. Great, let's try that again. And just give that a couple tries for me. Good, now I want you to turn your head and watch your hand on this one, okay? Just watch your hand. Make sure that forearm's coming vertical and straight up, and then the wrist is extending. You're all wrist right now. Elbow closer to your side. When you're doing this, a lot of times you're starting out from here, you're lifting to here, and you're just using the wrist. Remember, we want to see this thing, and I'm going to kind of hold on here. This forearm's going to come here, wrist is going to up it. Let's see how much more speed we get there.
Right.
Lift, speed, back down forward. Lift, speed, back down forward, okay?
Okay.
Good, watch that rod right there at your hand. Make sure your forearm's doing the heavy lifting. Poking a hole in the sky. Good. Okay, stop for a second.
Too far out.
Yeah, just extended too far out a little bit, which is fine.
Guess
But
now
keep
I'm
in mind, and let me
concentrating
show
on
you
that.
real quick. This is not, and this is a good point for watching this at home. This is not how you cast a fly rod. This is how we go through repetitions of building the muscle memory that will eventually get us to casting a fly rod. So in this discipline here that we're trying to figure out, remember when we bring this forearm back, open up that wrist, I want you to come straight down. Chopping wood, remember? So this thing's gonna come straight back down. And so the discipline here is just keeping this elbow into your side, raising that forearm vertically, opening up that wrist, and then coming straight back down, okay? So lift up, straight back down. Up, down. Eventually we're gonna get to where we're gonna be casting the rod, but right now all we're worrying on is that muscle memory of getting that back cast up where we need it to go, generating that high glide speed. Back 1, 2, forward 1, 2. Back 1, 2, forward 1, 2. And remember, watch with your chin, not with your shoulders, right?
Okay.
With a little more force than you're using, okay? Straight down. Elbow up, down to your side. Good. Perfect, Jennifer, just like that. Watch that rod, keep that arm tip up. Good. Watch that rod. You'll notice as Jennifer's casting that there's never a complete stop. She's moving back and then immediately going back forward. One of the things that's really important about a fly cast is its constant acceleration to a complete stop. As she's just moving that back and forth, she's not allowing that rod to load and generating any kind of a loop control. It's just kind of sloppy and all over the place. So we're going to see if we can't help her with that. All right, stop for a second for me. You're all right. What we're really going to want to think about on this next one is keeping in mind that a fly cast is a constant acceleration to complete stop. Remember yesterday when we were talking about starting that lawnmower, okay? You have a very short amount of string on that lawnmower, so when you grab that handle and you pull it back, you're going to come to a very abrupt stop. It doesn't slow into like an elastic band, it's a hard pull. So when you're grabbing that, you come to that complete stop. That complete stop is stopping the rod, allowing it to unload, forming those loops, and this is all about forming the loop. If you notice in your cast, when that thing's going back and forth, it's just kind of moving from one place to another. We're not making any kind of defined loops. So how we're going to get those defined loops is bringing that forearm up to a place that stops right there and go back forward, okay? Solid right to there, and just watch the hand. You don't have to watch too much behind you, but making sure that you're stopping and then going forward. This is the 1-2 in the back 1-2, right? So back 1-2, just like that. Back 1-2, like that. It has to go constant acceleration, complete stop to get that turnover, then to go back forward, okay? So just all you got to do is just tighten up just a little bit. Much better, good. Nice and crisp. Hard stop in the back. That's it, hard stop. Longer. Back 1-2, forward. Back 1-2, forward. Good. Back 1-2, forward. Beautiful. Hard stop in that back. Okay, go ahead and set it down. Great. So we're going to move along. I can see with your left hand that you remembered what we were doing yesterday, and you naturally want to go ahead and integrate that in there, and that's just fine. So what I'm going to have you do is drop the line with your right fingers and go ahead and take a pull off of that reel. Remember, when we start utilizing this left hand, we want to make sure that there's plenty of string between your left hand and the reel. So go ahead and hold on to that for me. Whenever we're starting off with this, you want to make sure that there's a little bit of a loop of line there, because as you're coming back on that back cast, you don't want that line to pull tight, which is naturally going to draw your shoulders around. So for right now, we want to make sure that there's plenty of string, and she looks like she's got it there. Keeping your left hand down at your side. It could be out in front of you or whatever. You don't need to stick it down in your pocket, but you don't just want to follow that arm around as you're casting, okay? So same thing, we're just going to pick it up and we're going to lay it down, really focusing on making this thing sharp and crisp. We want to come back and we're stuck. It hits hard, pause, and then go back forward. That's it. Crisp. Jennifer, remember how important it is. We just took a break and we looked at the monitor. We were able to see that you didn't have a whole lot of pausing in that cast. We really want to come to a constant acceleration to a complete stop. So one more time, we got a little more line out here. Holding the line in that left hand, we're going to come back and really make sure we're taking a sharp pause in there. And it's all about that sharp pause, that acceleration to a pause is really what we're trying to achieve. So coming back to a pause and then right back forward. You can see that I'm not putting a whole lot of energy into it as much as just stopping at the right time. So we're going to come back, back 1-2, forward. Back 1-2, forward. Just like that, keeping the elbow in here close to your side, okay? Give that a couple tries. Beautiful, Jennifer, that's fantastic. Much better. Keep that elbow closer. Don't lean out in front. Good. All right, Jennifer, go ahead and just pause for a second. That was fantastic. That was really nice. Did that feel a little bit better? Good. When we kind of panned that thing out, we really saw you're starting to get more definition in your loops, and everything looked really good. And that should feel a little more natural, like it's actually going places, and opposed to just kind of like flowing around out there.
And I see how just keeping my hand moving like that,
right.
It made a huge difference. Just stop a minute.
Yeah.
And I was so worried about the motion of what was happening that I wasn't taking that second to just stop and let it
And I
load
think
up and
that's an excellent point, and I'm glad that you brought that up, because whenever we come into the park and whenever we're doing these practices, the repetition is really important, but it's more important to do that repetition correctly. You know, whenever you run into somebody on the street that might say, hey, yeah, I'll teach you how to fly fish. It sounds really easy. All you got to do is just whip it back and forth. Well, there's a little bit of truth to that, but there's a lot more stuff going on in there. And when we work on these small little disciplines, that's really going to help us see that. So I'm going to have you do that just a couple more times, and then we're going to be working on your forward cast. But I just want to really drive home that pause in the background. Okay? Let's do that one more time. Let's go ahead and start working on carrying lines. So we're going to start working on our false cast now, okay? Let me see this rod from you real quick. The only difference here is now that we're going to be not trying to deliver the fly to the water in the forward cast, but try to keep it aloft, okay? This is going to help us getting into a little more of a rhythm, a little more of a canter, and it eventually is going to move into our false casting. So same thing, exactly what we were doing before, line in the left hand, left foot slightly forward. We're going to have that forearm come to a vertical place. We're going to stop tight with that wrist, with that rod tip right there. Now the next thing we're going to do is just move that thing forward, and we're going to try to keep that rod tip elevated. Remember, like we were talking yesterday, that you want to try to pick a place out in front of you that is above the horizon and actually above head level. We never want that rod tip to drop down below your head level during this exercise. And in fact, we want to kind of keep that high. A lot of people will talk about 10 and 2, and anybody that's ever been around any kind of instructional DVD, film or book, you're going to hear about 10 and 2. And basically all that means is we're looking for a wedge that is equal on both the front and the back in your cast, okay? And that's all that is. That can be vertical right up over your shoulder, or it can be drawn down closer to the ground. So it's not necessarily, if somebody says keep your rod tip higher, it's not a physical distance as much as the acuteness of the angle as you're casting, okay? So we know that when we bring this rod tip back on our back cast, that we want to go ahead and keep this thing up in the air like that at an angle, okay? So as we're looking at that as a little bit farther, we're going to have that rod tip up at a nice angle, and all we're looking for that is the same on the forward cast, okay? So what that looks like is we're going to go back 1, 2, forward 1, 2, keeping your thumb right up on top of the rod, and it's more of a punch forward with that hand. Back 1, 2, forward 1, 2, back 1, 2, punch forward 1, 2, keeping that thumb right up on top of the rod, okay? Fantastic. Let's give that a whirl. And remember on this one, you're going to have a tendency to want to speed up. Anytime that we do the next discipline on these building blocks, everybody has a tendency to try to hurry and rush through it. Remember, the whole point of practicing is practicing right, okay? So just take your time, make sure that you're nice and crisp, just like you have been doing, and then move that, accelerate that arm forward into a punch, okay? Do about 3 or 4 false casts, then set it down. Take time to kind of think about it, 3 or 4 more false casts, and then set it back down. Keep that elbow down at the side for me. Beautiful.
felt that rod
Yeah,
load.
all right. Go ahead and set it down for me.
I felt that.
Just watch, you're having a tendency to really extend this arm up. So your casting is going from nice and tight to being out in here a little bit. We're going to do it together for a second, okay? We're going to keep this left elbow right down in here. So we're going to come back in this cast, back 1, 2, forward 1, 2. You can see right here, it's just a quick little acceleration and a punch forward. Back 1, 2, forward 1, 2. Elbow down here. Great. Back 1, 2, forward 1, 2. Go ahead and set it down. Good. When we're doing that, I think a lot of times, and we talked about this a little bit yesterday, is trying to take some of that human element out of it. I think, especially if they made just a slight little bit of breeze, but everybody really wants to get that kind of whole arm in there. Yeah. Right now, all we're struggling with, it's just really hard to keep that thing down. And I don't want to
strap it to my chin. Yeah, I really.
Like I said, I've seen people do it before, like where you put like a phone book or something underneath your arm, and that is just so unnatural. Yeah. I mean, I get what they're trying to do, but I think if we just kind of work on that, and so just really on this next one, let's focus on keeping that elbow a little bit closer to your side. But I don't want you tense, you know what I mean? Like I don't want you sitting there thinking about it too much, but I want you to be nice and easy, but with that elbow down to your side. Good. That was really good. You had really nice, you actually had some really good loops form in there. You had good constant tension and really good canter and timing. Let's try that again, okay? You can see she's doing a great job of keeping that rod tip high in both the forward and the back cast there, not allowing that rod tip to drop and keeping that fly line elevated. Jennifer, set it down. Good. Remember, whenever we're working on some of these disciplines, it's important just to do 5 or 6 at a time. Get into a good rhythm, set it down, and start over again. But you had some really good looking stuff there.
I forget to count. I just get so into watching it.
Perfect, and that's great. And you know what? I was just kind of overlaying some audio on there while you're doing it. And what looked really good is you did a great job, and we'll see this later, of keeping those angles on that rod tip. Okay. Now all we got to worry about is generating that line speed. And a lot of that's going to come from just your comfort with the rod, as well as you know, just getting those motions and making sure those pauses. And that's the biggest thing. Remember, you know, when you come forward, I don't want you right now to really extend it out hard, but just keep in mind as an imaginary thing that there's something in front of you and it's coming to a really hard stop. That's the biggest thing. And the more, you know, pronounced that pause or that stop is in that cast, the better turnover and the better loop speed you're going to generate. Okay? Try that a couple more times but remember, if you get into a good rhythm and you're having a good time, do it. But I think for this kind of discipline and the stuff that we're working on here, that no more than 10 false casts at a time is great.
Okay. I will try to control myself.
You're doing great. Cool. All right, on this next one, I want you to say out loud, back 1, 2, forward 1, 2.
Okay.
And I want you to move on the B and the F. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Move on the B and back and the F and forward, okay? But I want you to say it out loud because you'll probably be saying it on my boat too, but that's fine. I want you to get into that rhythm. That's gonna be our cadence, okay? And that's really gonna help you out because eventually you say it enough, then you feel it enough, and then you start really understanding it.
Okay.
Let's try it one more time with you saying that out loud for me.
Back 1, 2, forward 1, 2. Back 1, 2, forward 1, 2.
Tip higher in the back.
1, 2, forward 1, 2. Back 1, 2, forward 1, 2. Back 1, 2, forward 1, 2.
Good. Go ahead and set it down.
Back 1, 2, forward 1, 2.
Good. Fantastic. How did that feel?
Felt good.
Pretty easy, right?
Yeah.
So now you say it out loud, you can kind of think about saying that in your head. You work really good on moving on the B and the F in that cast, and that's what we need to do. You get some really good loops and some decent line speed going, and we'll let's do this a couple more times and we'll take a quick break, all right?
Okay. Do you want me to still say back 1, 2?
I want you to say it in your head.
Okay, thank you.
All right, hold on real quick. One thing that we'll see in the video here a little bit later, what has a tendency to happen, and let me show you real quick. The reason that fly is coming, is hitting or hitting the rod is because this rod tip is coming around in such a way that as that rod's coming back and that fly's coming back, you're kind of crossing and meeting those paths. The reason that's happening is because on your back cast, you're coming in good here. On your forward cast, you're having a tendency to roll in across your side. So watch what this does on the line. If I stop back here where this thing goes, it's off of that right side, okay? When you come in here and flick with a wrist, you see how it's laid out over here now? So as you're doing that motion, that fly is traveling from that way to try to get all the way to here. And so everything's kind of mixed around. So we're churning butter a little bit. So on this next one, everything's looking really good, but keeping that thumb up on top of the rod and make sure that you're pushing forward, okay? What it's gonna feel like, everybody has a tendency, everybody's thrown a baseball or a football or something before where everybody wants to come in across your body. This is one of the biggest challenges that I deal with people in the intermediate to advanced level is really honing in, not crossing that body. And if we can catch that early, then we won't have problems with that later. So for right now, on your forward cast, it is gonna feel as if you're pushing this rod away from your body, okay? So as we're looking forward, let's pick a spot, and I want you to go about 3 feet right of the spot that you're looking, okay? So let's say right now that cone right there in front of me is the spot. I want you basically aiming at that the garbage can over there, which hopefully you at home might have something nicer to cast at than a going in a garbage can, but that's what we got to work with, all right? So let's try that one more time, okay?
All right, sounds good.
Yeah, you got that thing out. That's great. All right, Jennifer, go ahead and put it down. One thing that's important to remember in this fly casting, whether you're out here practicing or if you're out on the river or on the ocean casting, is if a cast goes bad, you can almost never repair it in midair. Sometimes it's better just to put it down and start fresh. So same way when we're out here casting, if you get into a rhythm that you know that doesn't feel right, just go ahead and set it down, take a quick second to think about it and start over again. There's no point in having this stuff whipping all over the place because it's just not going to help you at all, okay? So let's go ahead and start again. Velcro closet, Jennifer. Rip it back, punch it forward, rip it back. Back 1, 2, punch forward 1, 2. Velcro closet. That's it. A little more sidearm. Beautiful. Great, Jennifer. Punching forward. Feel that thumb. Push forward that thumb. Good. Good rhythm. Nice timing. That looked really nice. Feeling okay?
Yeah.
One thing that you did, I noticed that when you went sidearm, okay? And let me kind of hold your hand real quick. You only did it once or twice, but we just kind of need to focus on these things while we have them.
Right.
When you went sidearm, you just kind of went to whipping it to this
Right.
place, and you kept that rod tip pointed over here. So the sidearm isn't just kind of whipping it in here. The angle's kind of out here. It's just a little bit lower. Sidearm, I mean, we're not trying to skip this thing off the bottom,
Right.
off the ground there. So it's still up here like this. The difference between sidearm, which is this, to vertical is kind of that. So we're only really moving this rod tip 3 or 4 feet over that side. And what's nice about this too is watching this cast, we can watch this hand and this elbow drop in the whole time. Everything's just right out here to our side. And watch as we're just, see how we move that rod tip back and forth? See what that line does? It creates that loop moving back and forth, and that's all we're trying to do in the air. And remember, like we were saying before on that Velcro closet thing, you're gonna rip it back to a complete stop, start, boom, right back forward. But good cadence. That's it. Really, really awesome work, Jennifer. Really good stuff. Much better than yesterday. Much more defined loops, much more confidence in the cast. Just shake it off, keep it loose, and think you're doing great. We'll do this a couple more times, and then we're gonna work on shooting line a little bit, okay? And this, for your practicing for later on, I mean, this is exactly what I want you to do. I mean, when we're out here practicing in a park, we're not actually, fly casting. We're going through some of those individual motions and those little baby steps. And once all those come together, at the end of the whole thing, we're gonna be fly casting. And this is just such a great start. And like I said before, I don't need you to cast much further than that. I just need you to do it every time and accurate. And the more comfortable you get with that kind of distance of line and learning how that rod feels as it's kind of loading, the more confidence you'll have once we're actually out fishing, okay? But you're doing fantastic. Let's keep it going. Beautiful. Really, really nice. Take a bow. You deserve it. Look at that line. I mean, just right there where you're standing, everything laid out nice. It came off of that right hip. And think about that when you lay that down. That's what you want to see. I mean, everything you're doing, we want this line lined up off of your right side. That's perfect. Right. It's when it starts coming in front of you. And what you can't see on the video is we have a slight wind kind of coming in like this. Right. You're generating high enough line speeds to punch through that little bit of wind we have and lay that line down where we want it. So when you see that, you got to be happy with, seeing that it's not drifting across you. You got great rhythm and tempo. So just keep that up a couple more times. Good, set that down. What you did really nicely on those last couple, and what I was gonna come forward and tell you, is you need to pick up that tempo just a little bit. You're kind of moving after the back and after the forward. And you can tell when that happens, where you're generating good loops. The line is going forward, but if you notice, that fly had a tendency to kind of come back and skip on the front and skip on the back a little bit, something that you can feel on there.
Right.
You know, when that happens, that you can go ahead and speed up that motion moving forward and back. You still have to have those pauses in your front and your back, but you can speed it up just a little bit. And you did really good on those last 2 casts, okay? So maybe just increase that tempo a little bit. Good, really nice. Again, the reason that
Arm is out, I didn't feel
right,
good
well,
on
I mean,
that
it's
one.
exactly, and what's kind of happening is your back stroke comes out like this, your forward stroke kind of comes in like this.
Right, and I can
so,
feel it.
You can feel it. As that thing comes over, I mean, that's right there what happens when that thing kind of comes around like that. So remember, when you're coming forward, we're pushing it almost to feeling out like a push away from the body, okay?
Right.
You know what it feels like now when it's going right. We just need to try to replicate that as many times as possible. So I'm actually just gonna kind of leave you alone for a minute and let you just kind of cast and work through some things, probably 5 or 6 times, just kind of let you kind of feel it out on your own. And then, you know, I can come in and kind of help from there, okay?
Okay.
You want to be kind of zoomed out.
Yes, yeah, I think so. Hold on real quick, Jennifer, I kind of set you up for failure. We have about 10 more feet out through the rod tip than we had before, so let me just go ahead and bring this in a little bit for you.
Okay, it felt a little different here.
Yeah, it's a little bit longer. You know, eventually we want to go ahead. There's Lance. I think. Never mind. Yeah, that's going to be good right there. Just remember, you know, kind of like that Velcro glove thing. You know, you're going to rib it back up to complete stop, punching forward to complete stop. We've had a little bit of wind come in, and I think it's starting to get in her head. If you kind of watch, she's kind of overpowering and dropping that rod tip flat back there. It needs to be up at a little higher level. Jennifer, don't forget to poke a hole in the sky. That rod tip, that rod's going fully flat on that back, okay? That's it. Rip it back. Beautiful. Back 1, 2, punch forward. Extend that arm out. Rip it back. Punch forward. Back 1, 2, forward 1, 2. Back 1, 2, forward 1, 2. Punch. Jennifer, this thing's it's kind of parachuting on you, okay? And what I mean by that is that, and let me show you real quick, I'll take the rod from you. When we get these angles that really open up, okay? And what I mean by angles that open up is that we've gone from that perfect little 10 and 2, that kind of cone that we're talking about, and we've really broadened that thing out. The wider that stroke gets, the more open the loops get. And we want to try to close that angle a little bit so that we take a loop that's really wide like this, that doesn't have a whole lot of line speed generated, that can get blown all over the place. We really want to try to condense those into a little bit tighter loops. The tighter the loops, the more energy that we can punch through the wind, the better that cast is going to go out, the more we can kind of fight this stuff. So the way that you do that is not only on your starts and your stops, but just kind of watching these angles. The tighter that you can kind of get this thing in here and stop hard, stopping hard, the tighter those little loops are going to form. When you kind of come back slow on a rhythm, okay, even though your timing might be right and your rod tips are roughly where you want to go, you can kind of see we just don't have any loop control because I'm going through the motions here, but I'm not putting any speed into it. Remember, it's not how much power you have, it's about how you apply that power. And we're really going to get a lot of that good turnover by our starts and our stops. So coming in, we're punching forward, stop, forward, stop, forward. That's when we're going to get that good shoot, okay? It's all right, you're just kind of rearing up, and your forward is just a flick of the wrist. Remember, we kind of want to punch forward, following through with the thumb. A couple more, and you're done. Send it. Really nice, very nice. You are killing yourself with an extension of your arm that is kind of slowly stopping, okay? So when everything looks so great, and I can't wait to see it on film because you really do, you know, your loops are a little bit open, but they're really going out there. You're having a tendency when you go on that stop to slow into a stop on that last one, and we're just not getting exactly, you know, and that delivery shot is most crucial. Your first back cast is super important, and your last forward cast is really important. So one thing that you ought to think about doing too on this back cast is make sure this first one is really getting some line speed going, and then you can kind of slow down in here, but we want to, you know, start on a good foot. On some of your casts, you're getting a little bit sloppy in. You're coming back with not a whole lot of line speed, and you can feel it, so you're overcorrecting by going forward too fast, okay? So what we want to try to do is make sure that first one comes to a real good stop, and now we can get into a nice little rhythm, and keep in mind, we're just gonna punch to a complete stop, and that thing's gonna shoot out. That's what we're looking for. Yours is having a tendency to get into a slow start, like this. Somewhere in here, you find your rhythm really nice, okay? Then you decide to send it, and you just kind of come into a light send like that. You drop your rod tip down in there instead of punching and stopping, okay? So just kind of keep that in mind. We'll do a couple more. I can tell you're getting a little tired, and we'll take another break. Perfect. All right, great. So it's my last day here in Southern California with Lance and Jennifer. We moved from the park to a casting pond to practice some of the skills we've been working on and apply them to more of a real world situation. Sidearm. Sidearm. Beautiful. Fall through with that thumb. Good.
That let me know.
Yeah, that'll let you know.
That's
You're just coming, you know, just a little bit of those inconsistencies, moving that rod tip around. Let's do one more and then we'll take a break. But just kind of keep in mind, your fault is because you're right here. If you bring this thing out a little bit more, it's just going to keep that fly away from you and make that cast a little bit smoother for you. Start by rolling it forward. Perfect.
Why am I catching it? No.
Go ahead and send it. Yeah, you just
I'm gonna like whip myself.
It's okay. You keep on just doing the same thing. Just keep that thing out to the side a little bit. I think just kind of waking you up a little bit, but now I don't want it to get. Don't let it get in your head too much. That's caused by, you know, you're kind of keeping it high, but you're dropping up, and that rod tip comes back and kind of meets up with that fly. It's just from you just kind of being inconsistent with that rod tip, but you also have a wind that's coming in on this shoulder. So we're going to switch over to that other side, and you won't have that problem near as much. You're just with slower line speed and some of those tailing loops. It's just that wind's bringing that all in, and that's why it's continuing to hit it. If you increase the line speed and do a sidearm cast, there's
a good possibility.
It's less likely to not hit you in the head.
Okay.
But you know, whenever we show up to a place like this, and if we have a, you know, kind of a wide open area, that's important to kind of remember. As a practical deal, when we're actually out fishing, sometimes we can control the wind and sometimes we can't. But to build confidence, we want to try to control as many scenarios as possible when we're practicing. So when you show up to a casting pond like this or a park, you know, you want to try to practice casting with that wind not on your on hand. You know, either behind you, straight into your nose, or ideally off of your left shoulder or off of your opposite shoulder, and that way that kind of stays out to the side. But you know, what's nice is that you can then turn into the wind and play around with it a little bit, but you know, most of the time when you start, you always want to try to keep that wind off your shoulder there. So give me one or two more, keep it sidearm, and then we'll take a break. That's it, punch it, girl.
Came back too far.
Stand proud. No, you just leaned into it. Stand proud in that cast. Beautiful. That's it. Shoot it. Good, careful. Look how far out you are. Keep it in. Tighten up. Good. All right, Jennifer, all your casts have been looking really good for this next little session. Let's just go nice and slow. Let's try to really make sure that we're keeping our rod tips, you know, at those good angles in the front and the back. We're not dropping it all the way down in the grass behind us. When you decide to shoot that line in the forward cast, remember we're gonna keep that fly rod elevated above us, allow that fly to turn over before we drop that rod tip down. But right now, let's just focus on getting a couple nice loops going on, get to a nice little rhythm and shoot a little bit of line. That's it. Really nice. Rod tip high when you end up in that cast. Fantastic. You know, one thing that I've noticed that you're so much better on, you know, today than the first day is that when you're casting and you realize that you made a mistake, you're correcting it on the next cast before I even have the opportunity to say something. And I know at this stage of the game it's frustrating, but for me, it's really positive to know that when I leave tomorrow and you come back and practice, that you're going to be a little more self-sufficient in some of that stuff, and that's nice to see. So on that last one, you got a little bit goofy, but you're able to kind of correct it, and just so you know that that's happening. I mean, it doesn't matter if I'm casting or Lance or anybody else, we're all going to screw up at some point, and it's good to know, you know, when you're doing that and how to correct it. So just fantastic job. Let's do a couple more of those, then we can take a break. That line wants to shoot out there and go a lot further, and you have to let it. Make sure you stop that rod tip high on that very end cast. Is very important, but that line really wants to shoot out there. It's fantastic. Stop high, end high. That's it. Good. You know, by the end of that first day, we got to a point where, like, on occasion, like a little bit of line would go, but every single time you're shooting line. Now, there's probably something that you do a little bit that messes up here and there, but, like, you know, just to be able to shoot line and do that is just, it's amazing to watch you from the first day to the last. And I think, you know, when we come back and watch some of this stuff and watch how much you've improved, and I think that's going to be a huge confidence boost for you. And what's great about these videos is that although it still seems new to you and you're not as good as you want to be, but that we've only been doing it, you know, an hour or two a day for 4 days, and you're, you know, shooting 40 feet of line, and you're doing it every single time. And, you know, the rest of it just comes with, you know, time and you know, fly fishing is you know, fun as the amount of time that you put into it. So
right.
The more time you put into it, the more easy, you know, and more natural it becomes to you. So
right.
I'm just really proud of you. Just doing fantastic, darling.
Couldn't do it without you, Degger.
Love to be here for it. All right, guys, well, I guess that wraps up our 4 days of casting. Hate to leave you guys back here in California all by yourself, but it was so fun watching from the very beginning, starting off in the park, and you coming from kind of a beginner to intermediate level, and Jennifer, you never touching a fly rod before, to, you know, care where we've gotten now, and being able to have that video and working with you guys and seeing, you know, you going from, you know, never touching a fly rod to now where you're, you know, shooting line every single time and feeling more confident, getting rid of some of that frustrations, and Lance, some of the stuff we saw where, you know, you were rocking back and forth, your shoulder was really hurting you, and we were able to get in there and really kind of dissect that out of some of those videos. And then, you know, we've turned you into intermediate, you know, getting up to that kind of advanced phase. And thank you guys so much for hosting me, and it's been really awesome to see how far you guys have come along, and I look forward to having you back down on the boat in Florida.
We'll be
It's a pleasure. All right, guys, look forward to doing it again sometime.
All right, take care.